ladies and gentlemen, a constitutional law professor, will you welcome Maryland State Senator, we are very proud to have him here, Jamin Raskin, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, hello, Reason Rally. I'm here as a true blue Democrat, but I know we've gathered thousands of people from different political persuasions, so I thought I would start on a bipartisan note by invoking our last great Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, who spoke of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Lincoln, the great emancipator who watches over us today from up there and would be applauding each and every one of you for coming to defend reason in politics, was vilified as an infidel, an atheist, and a heathen. Why? Because he refused to join the church and he hated slavery. Because he opposed the Mexican-American War and debunked the false pretexts for it. Because he loved Shakespeare and the theater. Because he fought the Mormon church over polygamy and opposed every religious doctrine that oppressed human beings, and because he was a lawyer who believed in secular reason and moral engagement as the catalysts for progress. That's right, he was the kind of Republican who would never make it out of the Iowa caucuses today. But Lincoln's presidency saved our union because he knew that our founders, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, Ben Franklin and Tom Paine, had built our republic on the strongest foundation for government ever conceived before: we, the people. The founders, who themselves were denounced as heathens and infidels, insisted that all political power must flow from the people. This axiom reversed the claims of the British monarchy, which declared that power flows downwards from God to the king, and then down from the king to the church and the state, institutions set up as partners to control the people. Our framers knew that monarchy and theocracy were run by people too, but their dogmas needed to be debunked and overthrown because they pretended to speak for God in order to defend their own power. The founders made the people sovereign and divided power up, separating not only legislative, executive, and judicial power, but the state from the church. Jefferson argued a wall of separation was necessary to ensure that government would operate on reason, not dogma, and religion would rest on faith, not coercion. This was the breakthrough. The founders liberated government from the tyranny of religion and religion from the tyranny of government. They broke from centuries of religious warfare between Catholics and Protestants, holy crusades, inquisition, heresy trials, and the burning of witches. In the First Amendment, the framers said, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." And they guaranteed the freedoms of speech and assembly, which we exercise so joyfully today. And in Article 6, they said, "There shall be no religious tests for public office." These, my friends, these are the parts of the Constitution that the Tea Party doesn't know about. We became the world's first democratic republic, governed not by kings and their hand-picked churches, but by common sense in the age of reason, the title of Tom Paine's two best-selling polemics. And over the centuries, common sense has progressed and prevailed over the practices of unreason and injustice that were embedded from the start, like slavery and white supremacy, like patriarchy and plutocracy. But power concedes nothing without a demand, as that great Marylander and Washingtonian Frederick Douglass said, and so change has required profound and never-ending political struggle. The civilizing humanist movements that have changed America were created, and please take note, in alliances between progressive religious reformers of all faiths and secular humanists. They worked together to advance equality, freedom, tolerance, and justice. Pragmatists all, they were not interested in interrogating each other's private faith, but in acting on a common public faith that America belongs to all of us, and we should judge people not by their religious identities, but by the character of their public actions. Progressive coalition between people of religious faith and free thinkers has worked in American life, and we are winning in every generation. Progressive coalition is the story of abolitionism, the Underground Railroad, Reconstruction, and all the people who gave the last full measure of devotion in the Civil War to overthrow the slave masters. It's the story of women's suffrage. It's the story of the labor movement and environmentalism. It's the story of the modern civil rights movement, which brought together Reverend Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with Bob Moses, a mathematician and philosopher, and the secular-minded Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, all risking their lives for civil rights and for what Moses called the radical equation of one person, one vote, against the sheriffs and the KKK and the tyrants of the poll tax, the white primary, and the literacy test. In 1963, they stood right here where we stand today and drew upon the best ideas, the best rhetoric, music, and culture of both religion and secular democracy to open America up to all of its people. It's also the story of the fight to end compulsory religious prayers in public schools, a fight waged by Catholic, Jewish, Mormon, Jehovah's Witness, and atheist families, along with the ACLU and Americans United for Separation of Church and State. To this day, right-wing forces blame the so-called moral downfall of America on the Supreme Court's ban on prayer in the public schools. But the Supreme Court never banned prayer in the public schools. It only banned officially compulsory prayer in the public schools, which is why I like to say, as long as there are pop math quizzes, there will be prayer in the public schools. Anyone can pray whenever he or she wants, but the principal and the teachers cannot set up an official prayer regime. And I hope progressive coalition will be the story of our own time too, because we face big problems that require both people of religious faith and secular humanists to come together to solve. We face titanic forces of unreason and fanaticism blocking our path. Never before have science, common sense, and enlightenment values been more urgently necessary. Every scientific authority on Earth tells us that we are experiencing dramatic human-caused climate change, rising sea levels, melting glaciers, polar bears drowning, walruses disappearing, coral reefs vanishing, hundreds of thousands of acres of wildfire in Alaska, in California, record heat, record drought, mosquitoes and dragonflies in the North Pole, water wars, oil wars, and 123-degree Fahrenheit days in India last week. This is a civilizational emergency. But there are industries committed to denial and political leaders who never of their own volition utter the words climate change or global warming. Do you watch the Republican presidential debates like me? I do. For me, it's like electoral pornography. I can't get enough of it. I'm always watching to see if any of them will raise climate change on their own, and none of them ever does. And if they're asked about it, their response is uniform. I don't know, they say. I'm not a scientist, as if that were not perfectly clear to the viewing audience. But hey, if you're not a scientist, your job is simple. It's to listen to the scientists. Listen to the scientists. It's like if you feel sick, and here I speak as a cancer survivor. If you feel sick and you go to the doctor and the doctor checks you out and does all the tests and says, hey, this is serious. You need chemo, you need radiation, you need surgery. And you go home and your wife says to you, your husband says to you, so are you sick? And you say, I don't know, I'm not a doctor. That's why you went to the doctor, right? Like the deniers of evolution in the last century, the climate change deniers have set themselves not only against the finding of science, but against the interests of humanity. And there's even more at stake now. A century ago, religious fundamentalists opposed the origin of species and tried to block the teaching of Darwin, which slowed down advances in medicine and biology. But today, big oil and corporate fundamentalists are threatening the very survival of our species by denying evidence of climate change and stifling the changes in energy policy we need to reverse the lethal dynamics of global warming. Meantime, all over the world, theocratic dictators, jihadist movements, and terrorist death cults like ISIS are working to impose a regime of misogynist, religious repression over human civilization. And to respond effectively, we must tell the world the story of how America broke from theocracy and religious war by protecting both freedom of thought and freedom of worship, both secular government and religious liberty, simply by the ingenious act of separating the church from the state. But instead, religious fanatics and militarists at home, playing into the hands of religious fanatics and militarists abroad, seek to create a global holy war between Christianity and Islam. Jingoistic politicians propose to ban Muslims from our country, ignoring not only the principles of free exercise and equal protection, but the fact that the vast majority of Muslims are not terrorists, and that actual terrorists of whatever religious creed will be smart enough to check a different box on their visa applications once we inscribe a principle of discrimination into our immigration laws. My friends, to address the crises of our time, we must call upon not bigotry and cruelty and unreason, but all the best that science and reason and common sense have to offer. Rather than being reduced to a passive and spiteful TV audience, we, the people, must reclaim our place as the sovereign authors of America and the champions of all the best that humanity has to offer. Come on, America, let's put our thinking caps on. Thank you very much.
Jamie Raskin! Jamie Raskin, ladies and gentlemen. And in case you're not aware of just how cool a cat this man is, during a Maryland Senate hearing on same-sex marriage, Jamie said, people place their hand on the Bible and swear to uphold the Constitution. They don't put their hands on the Constitution and swear to uphold the Bible. Bless his soul.